Hello, everyone. It's Shauna. I'm coming to you on a wonderful Wednesday evening. I'm going to start talking to you today about my life kind of from the beginning. I'm going to start from when I was born and just kind of talk about how my life was growing up. I don't want to go too into details. I could, but then there's too many skeletons I don't want coming out of the closet. Not necessarily on me, but other people that were involved. But I'll start with my mom and my biological father. They were married. My biological father was a Scottsdale police officer, and they had me, and everything was good for a while. My mom was really in love with him. And then one day she came home and she found him in bed with another man. So they ended up getting divorced. And my biological father, the only other family member I know of was his mom, and her name was Dorothy Fisher. And my father's name was born Frank Fisher, but he changed his name to Don Erickson. And so I was born Shauna Marie Erickson. He he grew up in like a broken home, obviously, but he grew up also in boys' homes and stuff. And like the boys' home in Chandler, he was at for a while, and he also went to Chandler High School, which just happened to be the high school I went to. And when my mom, after they were divorced and my mom decided to get remarried, he decided that it was best for me if he let my mom's new husband adopt me. So when I was about 2.5 years old, I was adopted by my mom's new husband, and it was a closed adoption. Even though my mom she never kept it from me. She always let me. I always knew that I was adopted by my dad, but I never saw my biological father. I never saw my biological grandmother, but I but it never really bothered me when I was younger because life was pretty decent. My dad owned his own, my dad that adopted me owned his own plastering and, not construction, but plastering and, oh, I can't remember. Anyways, he owned his own company, and we had a modest 3-bedroom home in North Phoenix in an upper middle class neighborhood. We were like the only people that had an underground pool, and it was so exciting. I remember the summer that they had the pool put in, and then once the pool was put in, all the kids in the neighborhood, my parents paid for them to have swimming lessons, so all the kids knew how to swim because they knew that the kids would all be at our house, which they were. And we had a freezer in a family room that was always full of popsicles and stuff, so we were allowed to get popsicles out of there all the time. I mean, I'm like boxes of popsicles. It was kind of fun, and things were good. I'm the oldest of 3 kids. My mom and my dad had 2 more children, my sister and my brother. And my sister's 4.5 years younger than me. My brother's 5.5 years younger than me. And everything was really good until my parents started fighting. I remember the fights, my brother and sister don't, but they were horrible. They would scream and yell at each other. My dad would we had the first big screen TV that came out. It looked like a jukebox. I remember my dad brought it home. It was one of those ones that it had a big screen, and then it had a thing that pulled out and lifted up, and the light shined on the mirror, and the mirror reflected the images back onto the screen. It was crazy, but that was our first big screen TV. But my dad threw a roller skate at my mom during one of their fights, and he hit the screen and cracked the side of it. And I remember pickle jars being thrown and stuff being thrown, and it was horrible. And I always took my mom's side. I always wanted to protect her. That was just my thing as a kid, always trying to protect my mom. And one time their fight was really bad. My mom got into our van to take off, and I went with her because I didn't want to be home with him because he scared me half to death. So I left with her, and I went to spend the night at my cousin's house. My mom took me over there, and when she came back, my dad had taken everything out of my bedroom and put it in the front yard so that if I didn't to the some sort of sense that if I didn't like him, then I could find somewhere else to live. I was like 7. But anyways, I know when my mom talked to me about them getting divorced, I was all for it because the fighting was so bad and I was so scared of my dad because he was just mean. He never physically beat us, which none of us were ever physically beat, which is good from our parents. But there was a lot of verbal abuse, and it's hard as a kid when your parents are not getting along, and it's scary, and you know things aren't good. So I was grateful that they were getting divorced. But when they did, my mom got the house, of course. She got custody of all of us kids. We were supposed to go to our dad's on the weekend. I went sometimes, but most of the time I didn't go. I had my own friends and stuff, but then my mom started drinking heavy. She very, very heavy. It was to the point to where money was spent on alcohol and cigarettes and not on food or the electricity bill or whatever for us. And we really had a hard time. My mom would leave us alone, and I would be in charge of my little brother and sister starting at the age of 9. I was like 9 years old, and she would leave, and she would go out with her friends, and they would drink and they would drink and they would drink, and I always had to take care of my brother and sister, to the point to where I started to get frustrated as a child because my mom wasn't taking care of us and nobody was helping us. And I know now as an adult that there was talk about helping us, but nobody really knew it was as bad as it was. Our house was always a disaster. Power bill would get shut off. The phone bill would get shut off. Most of the time at that point, my dad would take care of it and the stuff would get turned back on. We didn't have cell phones back then, of course. We just had the landlines. But it was horrible. I know I started to get really upset and it affected me. I was sick all the time. When I was a little girl, strep throat all the time. Like every week I would have strep throat. And I would be at school and I wouldn't feel good. I'd go to the nurse's office. I'd have a fever. I'd go home. They'd have to take me to the hospital or to the doctor because I had strep throat and get it. And my sister would get it all the time too. But like I said, my mom was a heavy drinker, so I grew up in an alcoholic home, and she was never physically abusive. Again, I'll tell you, we never were physically abused by our parents, but there was a lot of verbal abuse. I know, like, my brother and sister would go to their dads all the time, and I always stayed with my mom just because I didn't have that close relationship with my dad. But there was times when she would actually leave. I'd be like 9, 10 years old, and she would leave on a Friday night, and she wouldn't come back till Sunday, and I'd be there all by myself on the weekend, and pizzas would show up. She would just send pizza to the house for me to eat. It was weird because your friends are like, "Where's your parents?" And you're like, "Well, my mom's not here." I never said she was out drinking, but I'd always say she wasn't home, and they're like, "Well, why are you by yourself at such a young age?" I'm like, I don't know, but nobody ever did anything about it. Nowadays, I think it would be a big red light for anybody, but it's, whatever. But there was also a lot of men in and out of our home all the time. There was adult parties, and with our pool in the backyard, I know a lot of times that they'd have like skinny dipping parties in the backyard, and there'd be men and women all in the backyard, naked, drinking, smoking marijuana, doing all that stuff. And it was really frustrating, and I was very frustrated as a child, and I'd get very angry, and I had a hard time controlling my anger, and a lot of times I took it out on my brother and my sister. And I know now that it's not right. I mean, I know the reasons. I used to think I was a horrible person because I used to hit my brother and sister all the time, and not just regular hitting, like, hitting them. And thinking about it now, it really upsets me that I did that to my brother and sister, but at the same time, it wasn't my fault. I was just a child, and I was put in a situation where I had to take care of them, and I wasn't really, I wasn't mature enough to take care of them. I was just a child myself. I'm still supposed to be taken care of. But that was our life, and that's how it was, and it sucked, but we got through it. We made it through it, and I spent a lot of time with my aunts, my two aunts and their kids. I loved their kids, and I babysit them all the time. There was a lot of time, starting probably about 11, I would go to their houses and I would babysit my cousins. But I don't know, it's hard when you look back on what the things that happened to me because of my mom's drinking and the things. I can honestly say that none of the men ever touched me. One tried one time, and I had a sprained ankle, and I made it. My friend was over, and her and I made it to the bathroom, and we locked ourselves in the bathroom. And my mom had passed out in her bedroom, and I heard the guy, he'd done some things to my mom that we could hear through the wall. And then he went through her dresser. We could hear him rummaging through her dresser drawers. And then he was trying to get into the bathroom. And he kept saying, "I'm going to get you girls. I'm going to get you girls." And we were scared. We were scared to death. And we kind of, we were in there. We were locked in the bathroom. And we heard him go back into my mom's room and shut the door. So my friend, because she didn't have a sprained ankle, just I did. We counted to 3 and we opened up the bathroom door, and she ran down the hall, ran out the front door, and she went and got the neighbor. And by the time the neighbor came back, the guy had left. And of course I shut and locked the door back again to the bathroom. But just different things like that happened. We had a guy that my mom must have given our phone number to him, maybe at the bar or something. And he started calling us, and he knew our names, and like he knew my name, he knew my mom's name, and he would call, and he threatened to kill us. He threatened all kinds of stuff. The police were involved. The police were tracing the calls as they came into our house. When he called, we'd have to talk to him to keep him on the line. And it was scary. The things that he was saying was scary. And I was probably, at that time, I was probably 13 years old. It ended up that they wanted my mom to meet the guy in person, but a cop friend of hers said, "No, that's too dangerous, don't do it." So they ended up having a police officer, I guess, pretend that she was my mom and met the guy, because they did end up catching him, but we had to change our phone number. And but it was scary, and I learned at that time in my life to never give your name to somebody on the phone unless you know who you're talking to. But it's just another issue for alcoholism. I don't know. When I was about 12 to 14 years old, I have a stepbrother, and he's older by 2 years. My stepbrother started molesting me, and I didn't know. It's weird to talk about. I didn't talk about it. I didn't tell anybody about it forever. It actually didn't come out until about 2009, 2010 is when I actually came out and started talking to people about it, and actually went to a counselor and was talking to a counselor about it. And he always, I remember him always trying to kiss me, and he had you could tell that his mouth was really dry, obviously from drugs. He did a lot of drugs. And it was just horrible. Every single night that he did it, I can remember exactly where I was, what I was wearing, what I was doing, what was on the television. Usually what was on the television was, back in the day, the TV wasn't on 24 hours like it is now. TV went off, the national anthem played, TV went off, and there was snow on the TV. So usually there was snow on the TV. And I kind of just put that in the back of my head and never really did anything about it. Just was like, okay, that's just something that happened to me. Maybe part of me at that time felt like I deserved it because of the way I treated my brother and sister. I don't know, but never really talked about it until I was an adult. And once I did that, and I talked to my sister about it a little bit, talked to the counselor about it a little bit, and after that, I was a little bit better. I got it out, realized it wasn't my fault, and what he did to me was wrong. Um, but and I know that I had talked to a police officer about another incident that happened that maybe I'll talk about another time. But I had told her at that time that I just kind of to be honest with you, I was raped by my husband, and actually we were already divorced, but he raped me, and I went to the police about it, and nothing really ever came of it because it was his word against mine. But I had told her that while he was doing it, I sat there and I did what I did when my stepbrother was molesting me, is that I would just go into this place that wasn't there. You know, I wasn't there in the present. My mind went somewhere else, so I didn't have to deal with what was going on. And she wanted to press charges, and at the time I wasn't really ready, and I don't know if I'll ever press charges on him. I It happened so long ago, and he's a mess anyways. He's been in prison most of his life, and I don't talk to him. I don't allow him around my children, and that's that. I disowned him. He's not my blood brother, which I don't believe in that. It's like blood's not always family. I have a lot of friends and stuff that aren't blood, but they're my family. But he's not family. His family doesn't do that to one another. But anyways, I just had a lot. That was just a lot of issues, and that's probably when my nightmares started. I started having like really severe nightmares. I have nightmares, and actually to this day I still have them, and they have a lot to do with demons and people trying to kill me, people trying to hurt me, me hurting people, me witnessing people hurting other people. Just weird, bizarre nightmares that have been going on for, gosh, 40 years at least. And it's actually at the point where my doctor now thinks I have a sleep disorder because I've fallen out of bed twice because of nightmares. The first one, I was pregnant with my youngest son, and I fell out. Sometimes I say Sean pushed me out of bed, but we just joked about that. But I did fall out of bed. The vacuum was near the bed, and I had fallen and hit my knee on it, and I had to get stitches in my knee. The most recent was just a few months ago. I fell out of bed, and I woke up. I woke up on the floor, and I broke my pinky. Is actually what I did. So I'm actually going to the doctor to find out about sleep disorders. So I've had the nightmares, and I was kind of messed up as a kid. I was really shy, like to the point where I didn't really talk to anybody. But when I was in grade school, I had a group of friends that I'm actually friends with now today, and I'm grateful that I'm friends with all of them. They supported me through I had breast cancer, and they supported me through my breast cancer. One of them even came and visited me in the hospital, which I really appreciated that. And my other friend prayed a lot for me, and she sent me Bible verses and stuff, and I really loved that. And the other one was just always, it was there. She said if I ever needed to talk to her, I was there. So they kind of knew what my life was like. They knew that my mom was an alcoholic, and they kind of knew what I was going through. But at the end of 8th grade, with my friends, instead of going on to the Moon Valley High School, like half of them, my 8th grade class, either half went to Moon Valley or half went to Cortez High School. We moved, and I ended up going to Chandler Junior High School, actually, in 9th grade, because the high school didn't start till your sophomore year. And I kind of went back into that shell again and didn't really talk to people. I was so quiet, and I used to tell people that my dad, my biological father, was dead, because to me, it was easier than telling people that my dad left me. And because that's how I looked at it. Is like I know what he wanted. He didn't want me to grow up with broken home or anything, but I grew up in a broken home anyways, and I didn't know him, and I didn't get to know my biological grandmother. And that was frustrating for me. But I did okay in high school. I did make a few friends, and they were great people. I didn't really keep in touch with most of them. Some of them I'm friends with now on Facebook, but we didn't stay connected. But anyways, and I didn't finish high school. My mom, we moved a lot. My mom didn't pay our bills, and we got evicted a lot. And we went from this nice 3-bedroom house in Phoenix that she sold to a 3-bedroom house in Chandler that we rented, to a nice apartment, to a less apartment, to a less, to finally we were just in like the lowest, not the worst apartments, but they weren't the best apartments either. The best thing about them was they were down the street from my aunt's house, so I was able to see my aunt all the time. But I started working at Taco Bell. I was only 16, and that was, a job that I took. And a lot of times, the only food that my brother went to my dad's and stayed with my dad the most. But my sister was with me and at my mom's a lot. And I would always bring home free food from Taco Bell. And that's what we ate almost every single day because we never had food in the house. And even at that time, there was still a lot of men in and out of our house. And and my mom was working in a bar, so I had a 12 o'clock curfew, but in all honesty, we didn't have a phone because she didn't pay the bill. If I was home before she got home from the bar, she didn't know I wasn't home anyways, so I pretty much did whatever I wanted. I didn't do bad things. I never, I wasn't out having sexual intercourse. I wasn't out stealing or anything like that, but I would go out with people and I would hang out till I know I had to be home. And when I was at Taco Bell, I ended up meeting this girl. Her name was Iona, and I ended up coming over to her house. She was married to a guy that was in the Air Force, and she lived on Williams Air Force Base, the base that was out in Higley, Arizona. That's not there anymore. And that's at a party that she had. I ended up meeting this guy, Joe, and we went out a couple times, but I had went to his dorm room one day, which I shouldn't have been. I was 16 on the military base, but I did. And I met his roommate. His name was Alan. And Alan and I hit it off. We got along really well. And when I was 17, I got pregnant with my first child. And I had already quit school at this point. I dropped out of school because I basically went to work full time so I could have money to. My dad had given me a car, and for my gas money, and my dad paid my insurance, and just anything else I wanted, my clothes I wanted to buy, or food from my sister and I, or whatever. And so Alan and I, we had already talked about getting married, even though I was only, 16 at the time. We talked about it, but it's funny because looking back at it now, the poor guy could have gotten in so much trouble because he was 20 when I was 16, and we were going out, and I spent the night in his dorm room. We'd go to the NCO club and we would drink. They never ID'd us or anything. I know things were a lot leaner back then, but that if he ever would have gotten caught, he probably would have been in Leavenworth, and that's just horrible. But we ended up getting married on January 31st of 1987, and then I turned 18 in March of 87, and then our baby Kevin was born in July of 1987. And I'm going to leave it off there, as I think that's a pretty good brief explanation. We're almost going on 30 minutes here, but a pretty brief explanation of my life growing up. Like I said, there's so many more stories I could tell you, but I really don't. My mom's not here anymore. My mom died, in 2013, and I don't think some of the stuff that I could say I need to bring up. Maybe someday I'll do it in a book, but I'm not going to do it here. But I just wanted to give everyone just a little idea of what it was like growing up And if anybody's ever lived in an alcoholic home, then they know what I went through, minus physical abuse. I never got the physical abuse. My brother and sister did from me, but not from our parents, which is a good thing. A lot of verbal abuse, but no physical abuse. But like I said, I'm going to stop it there. With my son, my son that was born July 18th in 1987, my little Kevin. And probably the next time I come on, I'll talk a little bit about Kevin, being pregnant with him, and what it was like having that baby and being married to an Air Force guy. So I'm going to leave it there. If you have any questions or anything, put it in the comments, and I'll try to answer them if I can. And if they're too personal, I'll just let you know that it's too personal, and I'm not going to answer it there in a public forum like that. But that's all I have to say for now. Please subscribe, like my video, and I will see you in the next time.